Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. I hope you're having an amazing weekend. And we've got some amazing breaking news here. President Trump just went absolutely nuclear and dropped actual names connected to Jeffrey Epstein. So I'm sure many of you know that Trump has promised reporters that he's going to make public an Epstein list of high-profile people who basically lived with Jeffrey Epstein, as he put it, and of course potentially engaged in some pretty heinous behavior. But we don't have to wait for the list. And that's because Trump is already dropping names. And of course, the first name on that proverbial list is none other than Bill Clinton. Trump said, if you're interested in who's routinely hanging out with Epstein, he's telling the press this, then you ought to be asking Clinton, who went to the island 28 times. Of course, Trump contrasted himself, saying, I've never been to that island. He knew Epstein. Everyone in New York knew Epstein. But he said Clinton was at the island dozens of times. I've never even been there. But then he dropped a second bombshell. He said, you ought to be speaking to Larry Summers. Now, if you don't know, Larry Summers is the former Harvard president who we now know met with Epstein over a dozen times after his conviction. Summers actually had several connections with Epstein, primarily two. This is a 2003 article in the Harvard Crimson highlighted what they called a very special connection between Summers and Epstein during Summers' time as Harvard's president. So Epstein apparently made substantial pledges to the university, endowing a program. He even received an office for personal use, despite lacking any formal connection to Harvard. That was the first connection. The second involves flights on Epstein's plane. Flight records presented back in 2021 indicate Summers flew on Epstein's private plane multiple times, including while he was Deputy Secretary of the Treasury under Clinton and during his Harvard presidency. So Trump just dropped that bombshell. Then he dropped the third bombshell. He said, you ought to be speaking about some of his friends that are these hedge fund guys. They're all over the place. And that's when we got the most jaw-dropping part of all this. That's when he said, I'll give you a list. I'll give you a list of their names, of these guys who basically lived with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the fact that Trump is naming names here right now and promising to release lists is not coincidental. That timing overlaps perfectly with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who's Trump's former attorney who defended him with that whole sham New York trial. He's been conducting a 2-day interview with none other than Ghislaine Maxwell. 9 hours total, as I understand it. So you may have heard Maxwell was granted limited immunity and answered questions about approximately 100 different people connected to Epstein. And her attorneys are saying she didn't hold back. She answered every single question in vivid detail. Maxwell received limited immunity during the interviews, meaning that her responses can't be used against her. So she's essentially been given a free pass to tell everything she knows about everyone she knows. Now, think about it. Who has more dirt on the Epstein operation than Ghislaine Maxwell? She was there with him for decades. She was the only one in the inner operation that was convicted and sent to prison. She knows where all the bodies are buried, as figuratively speak. Well, maybe not so. And she's obviously looking for a pardon. So while it certainly had a rocky rollout for sure, Trump appears to be playing this Epstein card perfectly. While the fake news media tries to drag him into the Epstein story, he's systematically redirecting attention to the actual swamp creatures. Clinton in his 28 island visits, Larry Summers in his post-conviction meetings, the hedge fund elite who lived with Epstein, in Trump's words. All the while, NSA and Justice Department are now considering indicting Obama and his inner circle for what Tulsi called treasonous conspiracy against Trump. And all of this is ultimately bound together by the rogue parallel government we call the deep state, or the administrative state, or the swamp. And that's what's so key here. This isn't ultimately about Epstein or Clinton or even Obama. This is ultimately about the deep state, an unelected group of intelligence operatives that function together as a rogue parallel government that governs by blackmail and murder. That's what this is ultimately about. We're on the cusp of exposing the way intelligence agencies around the world have used those dark habits as a means of blackmail to get these powerful and wealthy men to comply with their international intrigue, which involves basically running the world, instituting color revolutions and regime changes, all by this rogue parallel government comprised of unelected intelligence agencies. So that's absolutely key to get. This isn't ultimately about Epstein. This is about how he was used as an asset for the deep state, for international intelligence agencies, three-letter agencies that have empowered themselves largely through the dynamic of blackmail, blackmailing the world's richest and most powerful people to comply with and help enforce their rogue rule over much of the world's affairs. The Epstein saga is bringing this rogue rule to the fore, to the surface, and it explains precisely why the legacy media, which has been totally complicit in all of this, it explains why they and the Democrats are trying so hard to tie Trump to Epstein. Think about it. It's because they know the real list would destroy them. And so what are they doing? They're actually exposing in real time their blackmail tactics. They're showing all the world precisely the kinds of threats, the blackmail that they use on world leaders if those world leaders come forward with the truth. If you try to expose us, we're going to bring you down, either with a real compromising situation you found yourself in, like the fellows on Epstein's list, or like in the case with Obama and his inner circle, we're going to completely fabricate something like the Russian collusion hoax. Either way, you play the game the DC swamp wants you to play, or we're going to take you down. The legacy media, in desperately trying to pin Trump to Epstein, is playing out this blackmail operation in real time. The problem is, of course, it's no longer working. Again, the deep state appears to have met its match. Trump is politically unstoppable at this point. So we can be sure that the deep state is absolutely panicking this weekend between Trump's promise to release names on the Epstein list and Ghislaine Maxwell's immunity spilling the beans on upwards of 100 different people associated with Epstein. We may finally be looking at the end of the line for the swamp. God bless, guys.